It is July 19th. I think so. Pretty close to that. And it's 11 a.m. here in Novato, California. And I'm John Travis, and I'm talking to Richard Shames, known as Shames back in the olden days. I'm glad you got de-shamed. And we met in 75 when I staggered out to California from Baltimore, where I'd been plotting and scheming to open a wellness center. And you had the Holistic Health and Nutrition Institute, holistic with a W.
We were already open, and you came in with
yeah.
Both your hands full. You had one hand with the projector and one hand with a suitcase full of slides.
Is that how we first met?
That's how we first met.
Well, I don't recall the actual contact. I just know I spent a lot of time there. I met my partner there. I met Don Ardell there. Through me, you met your partner at the time. We had a lot of connections there.
Absolutely. No, it was a place of connections. It was one of those very exciting times. You came into California. I don't know whether you were drawn to this vortex that was happening. Some of the people you've interviewed already were part of a gathering of energy, of healing energy that was happening in the San Francisco Bay Area. And it was happening in all different places. And many people were, including me, we were talking about, we have all these healing techniques, a whole variety of alternative healing techniques that mixed with conventional healing techniques, a variety of different amazing practitioners, people who were world-class in nutrition or in body work or in meditation, so forth. They were here, and we, as a group, would have meetings and then talk about opening up a holistic health center of some sort. And everybody was talking about it, but nobody was doing it. Nobody was doing it. So I got together with a couple of guys and I said, we've just got to do it. We've just got to do it. And so we did.
Now, when did you first start meeting? Because this was before I arrived on the scene in July of 75.
This was in, I think, June of 73. 1973, we were first talking. There were meetings. The UC Med Center had meetings. There was the Holistic Health Council of Berkeley. So one was in San Francisco, one was in Berkeley. We were in the North Bay. There was a group in the South Bay. And all of this was in the early 70s. And by 1973, I was complaining that no one had started a center. And the guy that I was complaining to was a psychologist who said, you know, I've just spoken to a nutritionist just last night, and he's saying the exact same thing you were saying. He's saying, I want to start a center. No one's starting a center. You two guys should get together.
That was Rick Kozlenko, probably.
That was Rick Kozlenko, who had actually, it was in an office. He was subletting a tiny space in a larger office that the larger office had then closed down. So he was now faced with, would he rent the whole place? And I walked in and he saw his ability to rent the whole place because he and I would join forces. So we rented the whole place and there was nothing there and no one was there, but we called it the Holistic Health and Nutrition Institute because he had cards made up of what he was doing in his little office, what was called Weight, Health, and Nutrition. And he said, if we spell holistic with a W, we won't have to print up any new cards. So,
well, there were a lot of controversy in those days. A lot of people did use the W, maybe because of you. And it was back and forth, is it with a W or not?
Right. Well, the Greek root, rather, was with an H, the hologram.
Holos, yeah.
Holos. But in English, it got put to a W. Whole is spelled with, when meaning the whole thing, is spelled with a W. So whole health was the W. Anyway, it's the H eventually won out after years and years.
So when did you actually open the doors? And tell me more about how you got
We opened the
involved.
doors, I think it was by December of 1963. I'm sorry, 73. It was a little later than 60. Yeah, 1973, we opened the doors. And the doors were opened, like I said, to basically nothing in there, but an empty place without furniture. But we had it on paper that we were doing it, and we did that so that we could gather other people who wanted to be part of it. So oddly enough, at that time, the homeopaths, which were very active in the city of Berkeley and some in San Francisco.
Is that Dana Ullman?
Yes, that's right. Jack Goralnik, Ullman, a few other people were in the same place we were about starting a center. They wanted to start a homeopathy center. They did not have one. They had homeopathic study groups and they had lectures and so, but they wanted to have a clinic because they wanted to practice homeopathy. And John, my screen has just gone blank.
I'm still seeing you. I think it's just your monitor.
Okay.
trying to sleep.
But listen, no problem. I just wanted to make sure. I mean, this is the sort of thing that when we started the Holistic Health Center, these are the kinds of things that would always happen, and we just would plow through. So let's continue. I got a hold of the homeopath who was in charge and was able to convince him to come to our building to start his center, because they were just getting started. They didn't really need a whole place, every day of the week, and we didn't need a place every day of the week. So we were Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and they were Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. The eventual Hahnemann Clinic, the major clinic in the country for homeopathy, it was eventually in Berkeley, California. But it started in Mill Valley, California at the Holistic Health and Nutrition Institute.
I didn't know that.
Right. Yes. So we were, again, trying to attract a lot of people. The homeopaths really helped because they helped pay half the rent. But other people came in and were contributing and wanted to contribute furniture. And we had an artist who wanted to contribute the logo. And it was a wonderful, wonderful, exciting time where there was a shared purpose, shared energy. We were going to revise American healthcare for the better.
And then you picked up James Cloud along the way.
Yes. So he was one of the people that came in, and he said, well, you just because you have a clinic, you still ought to have classes for the public and all of these different healing modalities. And this was a godsend because the entire upstairs of this little tiny office complex, the entire upstairs was a large vacant room. Then we said, great, that'll be the classroom up there. So we had him put together some of the people that wanted to give a lecture, give a class on their level of expertise. So we had people who were dance therapists, who were massage therapists, who were chiropractors. There were, of course, the nutritionists were in abundance, and a few medical doctors, not just myself, but we had several other medical doctors who wanted to talk about how the new healing could be integrated with the alternatives that we were giving classes on, and in giving people an opportunity to come and experience in little offices face-to-face with the practitioner.
Who were some of the docs?
I wish I could remember. That was in 73. All right, let me think.
Well, I know.
Okay, David Chipkin, Walt Mock, who are still in practice now, but let's see who a few, and then we had a wonderful yoga practitioner that was on scene, and so would give classes, but also do individual counseling. And we had a psychologist or two. Then we had a variety of unusual alternatives. There were people that were doing biofeedback. So there was one guy who heard about us, and he said, I'd like to show you what I do. And he came to one of our classes and demonstrated all of his biofeedback equipment, which was prodigious. And we said, would you like to do this? We have an office downstairs. So he moved all of his equipment into the office. So we had a biofeedback practitioner.
I didn't know that either.
Yes, yeah. So at the beginning, we had more practitioners and more classes than we could handle. We had classes every day of the week, every night of the week. And we filled up the offices. There were I think there were 3 offices at first. And we were able to have them pretty full most of the time.
And now I remember a nurse named Carol something who was,
right.
What was her scene? Was she the nutrition?
Carol was a nurse who was involved in nurse administration. And we definitely knew we needed an administrator.
Oh, so she was, do you remember her last name?
Oh, I wish I did.
Well, not now.
Yeah, here it is. Her name was Carol Cliff.
Oh, yes. Okay. Wow. Good recovery there. And I remember that Rick Kozlenko's wife had a massage studio a few blocks away in Mill Valley.
Absolutely.
That was radical too.
That was radical. Having massage, it had a kind of a sketchy reputation.
Yeah.
Massage, but doing healing massage was something that she was very much devoted to and was good at, and
brand new.
Yeah, it's had some good practitioners. So eventually she came in and was doing her massage center on site. And then we had an opportunity to there was a dance instructor. This was the time that Anna Halpern was talking about dance for healing. And she had done some work with the Marin General Hospital cancer program. The cancer patients making a drawing, then dancing their drawing, and then having an experience about their total healing, not just the medical treatment of the cancer. Mm-hmm. So we had a dance. Part of the time we were doing a dance studio. So and then there was a person who was very big into sauna and hot tub, and so anyway, it kept growing. It grew gradually at first, but then it grew greater. And I am not exactly sure of what incarnation we were currently in that day in '75 when you showed up to do one of your classes, your slideshow classes. But we had been up and running. A person you have interviewed recently, Ken Pelletier, has confided in me that when James Cloud and Carol Cliff and I came to his office in Berkeley, and he was a practitioner for years and was good at it and had papers published. And so we wanted to get some ideas from him. We came and said, we're starting this center, and it's up and running, but we wanted, have people who are experts in their field and are in the regular, medical community. We want to get their input about, how we should angle it and what we should do and how we should offer things. So it wasn't totally clear how a holistic health center with all of these different practitioners under roof, including medical doctors and licensed psychologists. It wasn't clear how all of this could fit together. So Ken Pelletier gave us some ideas, and we thanked him, and then we left. And he said that after we left, he called in his people and he said, guess what? They're doing it. We're going to do it too. If they can do it, we're going to do it too. So that's when he started his center.
I didn't even know he had a center. We didn't discuss that in the interview yesterday.
It was, I think it was his regular office that he then wanted to expand the services and call it a holistic health center. Anyway, he wanted to join in. And when he saw the three of us and thought to himself, if they can do it, we can do it.
Well, great. Well, I showed up in July of '75. I didn't have my building accessible yet. I must have come over and pitched you before I actually did the class that Ardell came to, which is how I met Ardell.
Yeah, I
But,
think the pitch was either over the phone or because I remember the first time I met you was at the time of the class, and the pitch might have been to one of the other
oh, okay.
officers. So, but I remember that you came and I saw your lecture and I saw your demeanor and I saw your breadth, total knowledge about all of this. And especially your point of view about wellness and what wellness could be. And I thought to myself, of all the people that we've attracted to this center, this guy is a guy that we really need. And so I wanted to court you. I wanted you to be part of the Holistic Health and Nutrition Institute. And it was before you had contracted with your space down the road. And I tried like the Dickens to get you in with us. And you wanted to be on your own. And I thought, if Jack Travis joins us and we join up with him, that'll be like really powerful. This whole wellness component is going to be big, and that'll be extremely powerful. We call it preventive medicine, but it was better to be calling it wellness. And I also had the sense, because we had been doing it for a couple of years, that running your own center by yourself, it's extremely expensive and difficult. And I thought that together we could do a better job than either one of us alone. So I was, in a way, a little sad to see you go out on your own. I thought it would be very difficult and costly, and that together we would have a better chance of total impact on the community and health care in general.
Who knows if we had done that?
Right.
Where I was coming from as an extreme introvert, this is before I met Ardell, the extrovert who made it all possible. And I envisioned a tiny practice with a part-time biofeedback practitioner, and just something very small scale, and was shocked when I got the national attention I did through George Leonard and Ardell's article in Prevention Magazine, and was totally unprepared for that. So you could see that coming, and I couldn't.
I hear you.
But the other aspect was, we were using the word wellness when no one knew what it was. We had to spell it on the phone. And I was also just getting clear that wellness was really different than treatment. There was a whole different paradigm, and that the confusion, because holistic medicine and alternative treatment was getting a lot of press. It was Tom Ferguson's famous quote of, "Throw a dead cat over your shoulder in Mill Valley and you'll hit a holistic health center." I don't know where, there was just the two of us, and I guess.
Right, except that it was, for some reason, it was the center of the cyclone at that time. And there was a Mill Valley resident, George Leonard, who
Right.
had written several successful books. And so he was commissioned by the Chronicle, San Francisco Chronicle, to investigate and do an article about all of this. So he interviewed you, he interviewed me, he interviewed a bunch of people, and he was a fan. He was a proponent, and wrote an article that appeared on the front page of one of the sections of the Sunday newspaper of the San Francisco Chronicle.
I
And
didn't know that.
yeah, and so that really got things going. And then we had a different administrator come in to replace Carol Clift, who was very soon finding that it was just much more complex and difficult than her administrative skills allowed. So a new administrator came, who was able to get the head of Prevention Magazine to come, who was like George Leonard, interested in this, and thought it would be good copy for his Prevention Magazine, which was very popular at that time as a health magazine.
That was Mark Bricklin, right?
Mark Bricklin, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, and so he came and he liked what he saw. It was always fly by night. For instance, the dance studio, we couldn't afford any real furniture or furnishings, so we got a bunch of these big overstuffed cushions. And so all the classes were people sitting on cushions instead. And then we just clear the cushions away and we'd have the dance studio. He saw all of this and he said, you know, I think that we need, so he did a series of articles. And also he was head of the Prevention Press, which is now Rodale Press, a book publishing company. So he published the Healing with Mind Power book. He wanted a book about self-hypnosis and meditation. And so that was from his visits and his articles, it grew out that now we had a book about a lot of what we were doing called Healing with Mind Power.
I didn't know that either. My connection was Ardell met him.
Oh,
then
I hear you.
Ardell wrote an article about me that they published.
Yes, no,
It wasn't very accurate because the center wasn't even open when he wrote the article.
Right.
It was pure projection. And then he published his high-level wellness book with them. But I didn't know any of this other stuff. This is a real education I'm getting here.
Oh, exactly. No, you were involved. Don Ardell was someone that came to the Holistic Health Nutrition Institute and presented his material, and we thought he was red hot. And so, oddly enough, I wanted. I don't know exactly how you met Don Ardell, but I wanted you two to get together because I thought this would be good. And James Cloud, my head of education, said, "Rich, if you get those guys together, they may go off on their own. I don't think it's a good idea." I said, "Look, James, this is going to be bigger than all of us, and we all ought to get together." But so James was right.
But we never actually did anything much together. But he was out spouting about wellness. I met him at the presentation that night in your classroom. That's how we met.
Yes.
And then he had read Dunn, and it was the first person I met who had read Halbert Dunn. So we immediately bonded over that.
Oh, exactly. But hers, what I recall, these memories are interesting, and there's a convergence of memories. But my memory was that we had a special meeting at my house, and the question was to invite. We wanted Don Ardell to be there. We were going to do some planning and strategy about outreach to the community, and I wanted you there. And that's when James Cloud said, no, they don't get these guys together. And I said, no, we're going to do it. And so I invited, so Ardell and you, I thought, met at my house in my living room. And when we had that, we had that meeting. So who knows what's the real thing?
I'm trying to remember where your house was. It was in Tam Junction, wasn't it?
Yes.
I remember there was a nutrition guy who had a house over there where we'd have Friday night meals that he cooked up. The guy was
there
in
you
the
go.
food
Yeah,
combine.
yes.
But I remember that house better than yours.
Exactly. No. He was a good guy. He was very into herbal medicines and stuff.
Yeah. Well, so we don't know for sure how Ardell and I met, but and then there was Jeff Anderson and Milton Estes down the street on Miller, who I originally thought I would hook up with too, and that didn't work out. That's when I found the 42.
And I eventually hooked up with them.
Now, how was that? Because they had their office upstairs.
No. This was after I had gone and gotten married and moved to Hawaii. Okay, what happened? One day, a nurse shows up and to the Holistic Health Center, and James Cloud and Carol Cliff had told me that there's this nurse, and she's done everything about holism, and she had done this and this and this, and she was a head of the psych unit. She was this there. So I figured this lady would be about 85 years old. And she, because of all that she'd done, and she shows up, and she's this little person who I thought was beautiful. And she said, I've been checking her. The first thing she said to me, she says, Hi, how you doing? I just want you to know I've been checking up about your place, and you've got a lot of things, but you don't have any nurses here, and that's what is needed. And I said, I love nurses. Because I was so flustered because I thought she was so pretty and so interesting that that's all I could come up with. And
you married her.
And then we got married. Right. Well, it was a long courtship and everything, but I made her the first what was called health resource guide. The health resource guide was when you walked into this holistic health center, there would be not just medical doctors, but the psychologist and a nutritionist and these body workers and so someone was doing homeopathy. And, so how do you know who to see? You could walk up to the receptionist and say, I'd like to make an appointment. Okay, who do you want to see? Well, so it was Carolee, the nurse, who said, you've got to have someone who not only knows all your practitioners and what they're good at and what conditions their job is, or if it's plain that they just want to have health maintenance and health improvement, to refer them to the wellness people. She says, you got to have someone who knows that, but also it's got to be someone who knows about health and medicine, who would really know what the condition is, if there was a condition, and if it should be treated, or maybe that this is, maybe this is someone that, anyway, it's a triage. This was the initial triage. So we called it the Health Resource Guide, and Carolee was the first health resource guide, and she was great at it. And eventually, Kaiser took it over. The Kaiser Permanente HMO in the California took it over and called it the Advice Nurse. And so, so anyway, but I'm telling you this story because I met her and we fell in love and got together. And so we were doing the Holistic Health Center, but at some point we ran off and got married and went to Hawaii for a honeymoon and liked Hawaii, and we stayed there for a while. So I was not involved with the Holistic Health Center. I had passed the baton. And when I came back, I got involved with Jeffrey Anderson and Mike Rosenbaum, who were doing an allergy clinic, and I was doing the alternative healing for allergy patients. So that was my re-entry after Hawaii. We had a hurricane and Niki and a bunch of things, and so we left Kauai and came back, and I was able to get back in with these guys. So. By this time, Milt Estes was next door to Marty Rossman, who was a acupuncturist and imagery doctor. And eventually, I worked with Marty Rossman for a number of years. So there was this musical chairs kind of holistic health circulation.
Well, you're just reminding me that we connected up in Kauai because I was looking at that property of Jules's outside of Kapa'a.
Right.
And then you went there and I didn't, Jules was kind of weird. We wanted to form a community there. And
right.
This was before you met Carolee, right?
No. This was, Carolee and I were there together. Carolee and I we had been hired by Jules to be on the property and help maintain it and develop a program of some sort, which never occurred because Jules was that way. But one thing you should know is that property was the site for one of the scenes in Jurassic Park.
You're really kidding, huh?
But it was, a beautiful place. And the truth is, that's where Carolee and I actually formally got married. And so you came to Kauai, and we're looking at the property, and you had been helping out. You had a lot of connections, and then we took you up to a very special spot. The very top of Kauai is the top of the mountain, Waialeale Mountain.
Yes, I remember that now.
Yeah, it's a 4,000-foot swamp. Most swamps are in sea level or lower or something. This was a high swamp. A very unusual flora and fauna, and very beautiful. mystical and tropical, and so we took you there because it looked like you needed some healing, and so we wanted you to chill out. And actually, we had our best friend was a midwife on Kauai, who was, I thought, was a very pretty, very sweet lady, and so we wanted you two to get together, but the magic wasn't there. You two didn't have a spark.
Interesting. I remember being in that cabin up there.
Yes, yes.
Partaking of some sacred medicine and.
Totally, and then going on hikes and in the sacred swamp and all of that.
Oh.
You know, a swamp with wonderful mountain views and lookouts. So I think that a number of connections. It's kind of like, you know, the brain. Each neuron has all these connections, and then the neurons that are connected with it have all these other connections. This was what we felt was happening. It was a magical time, and for some reason, Mill Valley was this vortex.
Yeah.
And it was the spawned a number of other things that were offshoots that went at other places, but you were having major impact on this whole field of wellness, and we were told that we were having impact on this field of alternative medicine, which eventually became. We always wanted to integrate that with conventional medicine. But
right.
We didn't have the word for it. It was complementary medicine or holistic medicine. Anyway, someone came up with it, not us, unfortunately. We would have been great if we had come up with that early in the 70s. But someone eventually in the 80s or 90s said, this is integrative healthcare.
Right.
And so that's what is in place now.
Well, there was another connection that we didn't even know about. We both interned at the same public health service hospital, though we were a couple of years.
Really? Now, wait a second. I'm not sure I recall that.
Yes, because you told me my year was there 59 and
yeah.
And when I was there, my resident's wife committed suicide, and another resident tried to commit suicide, a South American resident. I was the first one on the scene, and I couldn't get the trach tube in him. Someone else showed up. He was blue as could be. And I mentioned that to you, and then you said you had interned there, and you had brought up this fact that, what was it, that an intern had injected himself in the heart with a lethal cocktail the year after me, or was that your year? And you pointed this out in the house staff meeting, and they poo-pooed it. I remember you telling me that. You don't remember?
I remember that. I just don't remember that you were there during all of this, which was a few years before my time. You were a few years before my time.
Right.
And so when I was there, I started the first internship group. It was like the first union. We unionized the interns. And the administration didn't know what to do with us because now we had a little power that they weren't having. So I said at one of the staff meetings with all the doctors, I said, one of the things that is not being discussed here is how this atmosphere of either competition or the extra hard work or something, that this whole philosophy of training doctors to the point that they are totally exhausted and totally demoralized, and some of them commit suicide. And that's happened here at this hospital, and we've got to face that. They told me to sit down. They told me this is not an appropriate topic for the clinical pathological conference that we were having. So sit down, Dr. Shum.
Yeah, wow. Another early advance, and we were ahead of our time.
I guess it was, because now at the days that's the more important, and also the death with dignity and not being experimented on and kept alive just for the purpose of the medical students. That was a carryover from the 50s and 60s that in the 70s we started talking about. And it was before our time, because by the 80s or 90s that they had really, a lot of the atmosphere has really changed and for the better. So I have no idea to what extent any of us had impact on how that was going, or whether we were just riding along the waves. But I would like to think that we had favorable impact.
I think at least in the morphogenetic field that we were contributing to it that way. My year there was the same year that Kubler-Ross was writing on death and dying. It hadn't been published yet.
Yes.
And what freaked me out was the number of cancer patients I had. My mental health was directly proportional to the number of cancer patients. And what bothered me was the fact that we pretended that they didn't know, that we didn't know that they were dying. And there was this collusion going on, which really got to me. And if I had 2, I was okay. 3, I was marginal. 4, I was depressed. And 5, I was catatonic. And I considered jumping off the roof of 5 West Front.
Right.
I went out on the roof.
Many of us had that. I was up in the ICU on 5th floor and looking out that window, and there's a balcony. I thought about jumping off that roof too.
Interesting.
And then I was also scared, so I mentioned it to the counselor, and she said, "Oh, a lot of people are thinking about. A lot of people have jumped off that roof." No, she said a lot of people thought about jumping off that roof.
No, I went out there and I thought, well, maybe this isn't far enough to actually kill me. That was my excuse.
That was your inner wisdom pulling you back.
And then they referred me to a psychiatrist over at Letterman, and it turned out he was dying of bowel cancer, but wouldn't talk about it.
Right, right.
So that was like, I gave up on psychiatry.
Well, that was the old days. That was how it was in the old days, and I think we've changed it for the better.
So back to WHN, you left and left it with what, James and Rick, or how did it?
Yeah, Rick was there. James, I think the new head of it, who had been the right-hand man, first mate, who was always critical of what I was doing and knew he could, and said he could do it better. Okay, I put him in charge. So he ran it for a while. That
was James.
No. He was an acupuncturist, MD from South Africa. Had this lovely South African British type accent. Smart as a whip. Very heart-centered. And so he ran it for a while.
I don't even know who that is.
Yes.
What was his name?
I'm trying to remember. Jonathan Shore. Jonathan Shore, medical doctor.
Oh, okay. Is he the one that got in trouble up in Seattle, that got raided by the
No.
Fed?
No. That was a different Jonathan. That was
yeah, okay. I think Alan Shore, yeah.
Yeah.
So then you went off to Kauai in about 80 or 81 when I went to Costa Rica.
Yes.
And so then Columbia Pacific.
In between there, you had someone that really should have been with us, because she was a hard person to handle in a smaller setting that you had. She would have been better at the Holistic Health Center, where her flighty energy could have been dissipated out. Devika Spino, the exercise instructor.
Well, she never was with us. She did a workshop there.
Oh,
Faced before we opened the center, but no.
She was part of your gang.
No, I knew that was impossible.
Right.
So then WHN morphed into Columbia Pacific at some point?
Yes. My wife, Carolee, being the nurse, she told James Cloud that he needed to come up with a special set of classes for nurses. And Carolee put the word out, and we had 80 nurses descend on the place. And they got together, and they said, in addition to us learning, some of these techniques, because as nurses, we can do a lot of these things in the hospital with patients or on our own outside.
Yeah.
And although the on the own outside was usually in the past had been, you have to have a doctor directing everything you do.
Yeah.
And what they came up with, these nurses came up with, is we're going to consolidate. We're going to form an organization. And they called it Nurses in Transition. And it was nurses from in the Marin, Sonoma area, but also nurses in San Francisco and South Bay. There was Alameda and Berkeley. The entire Bay Area was involved in this. they had, I think, six, seven locations where the nurses would get together once a month for this new organization and how they would promote it in the hospitals and so forth. So Carolee said, we need a training arm for this maneuver of change, not just changing medical services, but changing the field of nursing. There are many, 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 many more nurses than medical doctors. So so anyway, we're going to change that field too. Okay. So Carolee and James put together some of the best classes and courses, and were able to get that college in San Francisco. You just said the name of it.
Columbia Pacific.
Anyway, it was a college that you just mentioned.
Columbia Pacific University is what I remember, because Joy got her PhD from
I
there.
know, I hear you. No, I think it was New College of San Francisco.
Oh, there is New College there, yeah.
Yeah. Columbia Pacific was what the people that eventually took over the Holistic Health and Nutrition Institute started and maintained. It was a new university that would give credits for this alternative field. In other words, you'd get college credit. This what Carolee was able to put together was that through New College was that the nurses would get nursing credits. Okay,
Yeah.
And if they got enough of those, then they could have a BA. This was for nurses who did not have their degree. It's called a BA in nursing is a separate degree. So so she put together this program, and it was popular enough that it kept going for a while.
Now, this was around the time American Holistic Nurses Association would have been forming. Was Carolee behind that too?
Carolee did not form that, but it was just like the Ken Pelletier story. There's a nurse in Colorado who had been talking with nurses in different parts of the country, and all of her, they wanted to start a nursing organization, okay? And they didn't quite know how, or didn't have the wherewithal, and then they heard about this organization called Nurses in Transition and said, darn it, if they can do it, we can do it. So this was a few years later, but they had heard about Carolee, and Carolee eventually joined them and became one of their instructors.
And that was around the time that Norm Shealy started the American Holistic Medical Association.
Yes.
Where I met Regina, my co-author.
Yes.
And were you at that a part of that or not?
Yes. No, I was at the founding meeting of the American Holistic Medical Association.
You were there too, and at the Regency Hotel in Colorado.
The Regency, and it was what I remember was the big debate about whether to spell holistic with a W.
Yeah.
And I was way proponent for the W because that was my center, and I thought it would be, anyway, the H won out, and that's where it won out. I had forgotten that, yes.
Yeah. I gave my dog and pony show there, and then I got attacked.
Oh, yes.
Was it Tom Harris? He was drunk.
Yes, there was I think it was Sidney Harris was the guy who wrote "I'm Okay, You're Okay."
Thomas Harris. Yeah, it was him. Because actually, his wife Amy wrote the second half of the book, which was way better than the first half.
Oh, exactly.
Kind of boring.
When you pressed him on it, he will tell you she wrote the whole thing.
Oh.
But hers, I had a chance to talk to Norm Shealy after this, okay, and I remember that you gave your whole talk, and you said, now people have asked, this is at the end of your talk to this holistic health informing organization, and so you said, people have asked me, in fact, Shamus himself, shouldn't wellness be part of the holistic health? And I don't think it should be. I think wellness should be its own separate thing. Okay. So there were a few gasps from the audience about that. And but it flew. Everybody, eventually saw the wisdom, except for Norm Shealy. I was in a cab ride with him to the airport after the conference. And I said, listen, Norm, Travis doesn't think holistic, health and wellness should go together, whatever. And he did a wave of his hand. He said, oh, of course it should go together. So I don't know if I ever told you that, but he thought it should be combined. So, that's two of us now, Jack. You got Norm Shealy and me who thought that, we should have combined, forces. Like, okay.
Well, what's interesting is that I'm going to interview Norm next, so I will
Norm was very supportive. I told him that the book that the center had gotten, published was, we haven't written it yet, but it was, we got the contract through Rodale. And he said, oh, you're going to be fine. Rodale, they can promote their own books through the prevention people, and you're going to be fine. He says, I went with Dell. He says, my book went with Dell, and it was going to be, had a title that was wonderful. It was the future of American medicine, the holistic health, or so, it was a grandiose, and right on. And I love that title. And he said, but Dell, and you can't argue with them because they're not like Rodale or some other publishers. They decided to call my book Occult Medicine Can Save Your Life.
Oh, no.
And that's was the book that Norm Shealy first published, and he was so mad, but he couldn't do anything about it. So he was very encouraging about us, and it turned out our book, did very well.
Well, just philosophically, my reasoning behind keeping them separate but aligned is that there's two different paradigms. The treatment paradigm is about fixing problems, and you can do it with conventional allopathic medicine, or you can do it with alternative holistic medicine, or combine them in integrative medicine, but it's still focusing on fixing problems. It's a treatment paradigm, whereas the wellness paradigm doesn't fix anything. It works in parallel on the illness side of my illness-wellness continuum.
I totally agree. Agree. And
only the wellness one can cross over the neutral point because there's nothing left to treat when you reach the neutral point.
Exactly. No, I totally agree. Now I absolutely understand that and see that. And I want you to know, though, even though I totally agree, I think it is still possible that you could have a clinic that offers wellness for the people that have progressed along to the point that they need.
Yeah.
And the people that come in right away and think they need something, and they are basically not suffering with a diagnosable illness. What they need is wellness right from the beginning. And so
yeah.
I thought it should all be under one roof.
Well, I had hoped for that too. The problem is that I couldn't find any treatment doctors, but maybe you would have been the exception, who would stand for it, because doctors want to be all things to all people, and they keep saying, well, I'm already doing wellness, I don't.
Right.
And
right.
They don't get there's a difference, because
absolutely,
if you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That was my problem for 50 years. I've dealt with that. The other part of it is that I just lost my train of thought.
Well, listen, no, the other part of it, I can tell you, the other part is that people who are needy in some way, they don't understand this kind of distinction either. That it's so ingrained in the American mind that you're sick with something, you take a pill, or you have an ailment, you go see the doctor. The paradigm in other countries, like the acupuncturist, they are into, well, they treat people who are totally fine because they want to keep them that way. That kind of thing. It's a different perspective that I understand where you were coming from. It's have to educate the American public, which is still a problem now.
Well, yeah, what's happened is that the word wellness got co-opted by the treatment people back in the 80s, largely because Ardell got it out to the hospitals and they glommed onto it.
Right.
And, the word wellness would probably never gotten out of Mill Valley if that hadn't happened.
Well, wait
but
a
it
second.
diluted it.
You don't know about Boca Raton, Florida. I moved to Boca Raton, and there was a hospital there, Broward County Hospital,
Mm-hmm.
that someone was able to talk them into a wing that was not being used. They activated it into what was called the Wellness and Healing Center. They had to put the word healing on there, but the hospital number. But anyway, it was a wellness center, and it was a lot like WHN or a lot like your center, but it was inside the hospital, totally separate from the hospital, but inside the hospital, so that patients coming to the hospital clinics, which they had, or patients who were in the hospital, who would be able to get up out of bed and walk over and partake of this. It was there. And it was absolutely, they called it the wellness wing.
Yeah, Don said that at one point in the early 80s, there were 1,000 of them in hospitals, but I think they learned, as I did, that you can't make them financially viable because insurance didn't cover it, and people aren't willing to put up money for prevention on themselves. They will on their cars, but not on themselves.
Right.
Well, the other thing was that I encountered was being a physician, and I do the initial wellness evaluation, which was 2.5 hours with a client. And then I would screen them as to.
You do it with these computer instruments where, you ask all these questions and you put it in and you get a graph. At one time it was a graph, and then it was eventually a circle. I mean, you were doing a very elaborate evaluation of people.
Well, I didn't have much computer stuff early on. We had a computerized nutritional survey.
Right.
And I did a health hazard appraisal.
Right.
It's still called that. I had my little wellness inventory. We had 11
different
different
the wellness index. No, the wellness index was the circle. I thought that was the divine.
No, the wheel preceded the index. First it was the inventory.
Okay.
And then when we published the wellness workbook, we did an expanded version with the same wheel.
Okay.
Actually modified it to 12. It had been 10. But the problem was that I would sit with these people for 2.5 hours, and they still expected me to pull a magic wand out of my drawer and heal them. I had them sign a contract that we didn't treat, diagnose, or prescribe. And they signed that.
Right.
And it still didn't work. It was only when I trained Barbara McNeil, then became Bobby, to do the assessments, because she wasn't a physician. She could make a lot more progress with them because they didn't have that underlying belief that I, as a doctor, could fix them.
Exactly. No, there's a cartoon about that. Okay, it's the guy, with the bone through his nose and a very mysterious gaze and these robes with tapa bark. This is in the the South Seas. He's the medicine man. And he has an office, which is one of those mud and straw huts. Person comes into the office, and he's telling the story about how the shark bit him and and all this stuff. But he's okay. But he's now still rattled or has a problem. Okay. So whatever the problem is, the medicine man then says, "Okay, now I just want you to know you can heal this yourself. Okay, but I can help." And he goes into the back room, and the back room has on the wall filled with masks, some happy masks, scary masks, sad masks. So he finds the appropriate mask, and he puts it on, and then jumps out with a whoop and scares the patient with that mask, and the patient then has the appropriate response of, "Oh wow, now I'm healed," and then leaves. So there's that mental expectation of the person that you will do something, but it doesn't have to be anything other than the mask or the encouragement or anyway, that was how I would do what my preventive medicine wellness thing would be. Although I did not use the mask. I never got to the point that I used masks.
Aha. Well, now just going ahead in the future, after you did, I still remember meeting up with you at, I think it was the Religious Science Church in Santa Rosa.
Yes.
you're saying you did a floridectomy. You finally accomplished your floridectomy.
The floridectomy.
And then that was when you moved back to Sebastopol.
Oh, right. Yes, we got rid of Florida and moved back to.
I always remembered that term, floridectomy, that you coined. Apparently you don't remember it.
I don't. But it sounds like something I could have come up with. Right. My wife could have come up with that maybe. Right. Oh, Florida was just a very interesting kind of situation where my wife and I were born and raised in South Florida. And it was lovely. It was palm trees and people were nice. And anyway, well, by the time we moved back there, 30, 40 years later, it was very, very different. Just all built up in fast pace, but third world in a way, and very difficult to get things done, but a lot of expectations and a lot of rip-off artists, and it was just a whole different. Florida was very different than when we were born. So you had told me this. Jack, you had said, when I was thinking about moving to Florida, you had said, you can't go home again.
I remember.
You were right, though. You were right. It wasn't the same. And so we left there. We did a floridectomy. We got out of Florida and have been much happier ever since.
I've been reading a series of Carl Heisen's books about skink.
It's like that. It's truly like that.
He really describes it well.
Yes.
So then you came back here and got into thyroid, and that's your main
right.
gig
Well,
now.
Yeah, exactly. I had gotten involved with Carolee, the story that I told you about this nurse, and it turned out she had had a long family history. Her grandmother, her mother, and now her. Her problem was thyroid, low thyroid, and she went to. I didn't know about this, and I said, "Look, you're having a thyroid problem right now. It's kind of resurfacing. Go see the endocrinologist." She would come back and she said, "I went to this endocrinologist, and boy, this guy was from Hunger." That's a Southern expression, meaning he wasn't too good at what he was doing, because she's a nurse and she knows about this stuff, and she knew her thyroid stuff, and he was treating her. Like she was an imbecile, but also he was telling her stuff that she had already done that didn't work, and he was telling her to do it again. Anyway, I said, go see a different, that was a bad guy. Go see a different guy. So she went to another guy. Same thing. So the endocrinologists were very big and good at diabetes, but the thyroid, they just, didn't give too much attention to, and they weren't that good at it. So I started getting into it. And then whenever I would see a thyroid patient, I would do some of the holistic health stuff, and it would really help. And then I combined it with regular medicine, and so the patients were getting better. So soon there were more and more thyroid people coming to me for basically what was going to be what I was used to call holistic health, but now I called it better thyroid care. so I became a specialist.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, and that's still your main. Are you semi-retired or going? You're a couple of days a week down here? Or?
Yeah, I'm a couple of days a week. I'm definitely semi-retired, but I am very much involved in the field. The field that I thought would gradually open up and get better and better, this thyroid care, has not. It is still, unfortunately, almost everywhere practiced as follows. There's one test that you need, only one. That's called the TSH screening test. And that checks your pituitary hormone. And that's all you need to know about thyroid. And then if it's abnormal, which is only abnormal in the most serious of cases. So a lot of people walking around who have the problem that the TSH test doesn't pick up. Okay, but when it's abnormal, there's only one medicine that you need, and that's levothyroxine. The biggest company is the Synthroid company. They make levothyroxine. Okay, so Synthroid is the only medicine that you need, and the way you manage how much Synthroid the person takes is by this single TSH test, which is not very good for that job either. So it should be that there'd be a panel of at least 4 or maybe 5, different thyroid tests that you could look at the situation from several different windows, not just the one window of TSH. And there are a dozen or maybe 10 different thyroid medicines that could be used for people that don't do well with the levothyroxine alone, which is many, many people, millions of people that are on it and not doing as well as they want. Many people should be on it, but their doctor says the TSH is normal. So, you don't have a thyroid problem, but their mother had it, their grandmother had it, their sister has it, their brother has it, their children have it, and they have all the same symptoms. Okay, the patient has all those thyroid symptoms, but the doctor said, well, the TSH is normal, so you don't have it. So I do a lot of thyroid work. I do telemedicine. You got me into this with your computer stuff and all your gadgets. I talk to people through Skype and give them advice about their tests, which they send me by fax. And I can talk to people in Spokane, in Chattanooga, in Orlando. I talk to people all over. And unfortunately, it's everywhere the same. The doctors only do a TSH and they only will give levothyroxine, a Synthroid. And for the millions of people that are not doing well with that maneuver, it's a popular maneuver because some people do well with it, but millions don't. So I see those people. And sometimes I see them in my office, face to face. And sometimes I talk to them over the airwaves and do educational sessions.
Yeah, wow, still at it. But you're 74, 73?
74, yes. Oh, I'm still very much at it, yeah.
Yeah. Well, who knows? What do you think in the next 10, 15 years we're going to see with wellness and integrative medicine? And as Ken Pelletier says, the existing system is not sustainable, it's collapsing. He talked about horrible statistics that we're similar to some African nation in terms of effectiveness, like 37th.
Oh, exactly. Yeah. It's extremely expensive and less than optimally effective, way less. This healthcare system is going to change, but what people are focused on, unfortunately, is how to finance healthcare. They're not focused on what kind of healthcare we want to finance. It's being talked about. It was even in the presidential debate, even in 2016, but certainly here lately. And they're talking about what is called preventive care. I haven't heard the word wellness. I haven't heard the word integrative, but they're beginning to realize that something like that has to become a bigger and bigger part of what's going on, because it's eating up the whole national budget.
Yeah, and it was when we were back in the 70s.
Yeah,
we thought it was going through the roof, and so much worse now.
It's worse now. So I think that there's talk about single payer healthcare that eventually might replace the Affordable Care Act, and they're going to be in these new proposals funding for coverage of wellness services, of preventive services, of exercise services, of stress reduction services, because that's actually being done in some other countries effectively.
Yeah, and Pelletier was saying they have good data now. The corporations are seeing the need for it to keep their employees healthy, and
absolutely,
they've got a good database to prove it's cost effective.
Yeah, no, I mean, aren't there wellness programs at the big corporations? They have a gym in house. They have other people.
What they call wellness anyway. It's a far cry from Halbert Dunn, but.
Right.
What kind of parting words, we need to wrap up here, but what would your words to future generations be as the wise man of WHN? And
I can tell you that this was thought about very carefully by a lot of very wise, some famous people. And the one that I remember most was Thomas Edison. Edison was very practical. as you know, and came up with a lot of things. And when he thought about what was going on with healthcare, and back in his time, he said, the physicians of the future will give no medicine and do no surgery, but instead will interest their clients in the care of the human frame, in nutrition and exercise, and in the causes and prevention of illness.
I remember Tom Ferguson used to use that quote a lot in Medical Self-Care magazine. And I think he said that he actually made it up because he couldn't find a source for it.
I found a source for it.
You did?
Oh yeah. No, it was Edison talking as he was an old man, and he was giving a lecture to some large civic group, the Chicago. Anyway, it was a talk he had been given.
Oh, great. Well, I'm glad to know. Tom said he was paraphrasing, he thought, but if you've got the source, then that answers a question I've had for 40 years.
I'm glad, Jack, to have been able to answer a question of 40 years.
Oh man, what a walk down memory lane this has been.
Well, it's a pleasure. Thank you.
Likewise. So with that, I think we'll end the recording, and I can figure out how. It keeps going away here. Why? I keep tapping on recording and it says recording, but it doesn't give me anything more to do with it. Ah, here we go. Stop. Aha.